The air in the boardroom of Sterling Cross Holdings didn't just feel cold, it felt sterile, like a room prepared for a surgical extraction. I sat at the mahogany table, my fingers tracing the edge of a leather-bound folder. Inside was the 3-year expansion plan for our European sectors, my brainchild, my sweat, my life's work. At 32, I had spent a decade in the shadow of my father, Julian Sterling. I was the first one in the office and the last one to leave. I had saved this company from 3 different lawsuits and a bankruptcy scare, while my father was busy finding himself on golf courses in the Hamptons. Today was supposed to be the day. The senior vice presidency was vacant, and the board had already signaled their unanimous support for me. I looked at the empty seat at the head of the table, waiting for the man who had raised me to be a shark, only to realize too late that sharks don't have families. They only have prey. Before we see the moment the knife was twisted, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a single second of this empire falling. The double doors swung open. My father walked in, looking tanned and invigorated, but he wasn't alone. Trailing behind him, clicking her 4-inch Louboutins against the marble floor, was Celeste. She was 26, a former brand consultant my father had met at a yacht club 6 months ago, and his wife of exactly 3 weeks. She was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, and her smile was as sharp as a razor blade dipped in honey.
"Good morning, everyone," Julian boomed, his voice echoing with a newfound, terrifying bravado. He didn't look at me. He sat down and pulled Celeste's chair out right next to his, the seat reserved for the vice president. My blood turned to ice. "Dad, we have the European proposal on the agenda. The board is waiting." He finally looked at me, but his eyes were different. They were distant, clouded by a strange mixture of guilt and ego. "Actually, Maya, there's been a change in the agenda, a restructuring. After the wedding, I realized that Sterling Cross needs a fresh perspective. We've become too rigid, too focused on the old ways of doing things." "The old ways?" I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "The old ways grew our revenue by 40% last year. My ways." Celeste leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, her diamond wedding ring catching the light. "Maya, honey, don't be so defensive. Julian and I have been talking. You've worked so hard, but you're burnt out. You're all work and no vision. A company like this needs soul. It needs glamour." "Glamour doesn't manage global supply chains, Celeste," I snapped. "Enough," Julian barked, slamming his palm on the table. The silence that followed was deafening. "The board has already signed off on my recommendation. As of 10 minutes ago, Celeste has been appointed Senior Vice President of Sterling Cross. She will be overseeing all major accounts, including the ones you've been managing." The room blurred. The board members, men I had played squash with, men who had seen me grow up, looked at their laps. They had been bought or bullied. "And where does that leave me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Julian didn't even flinch. "It doesn't. Your contract contains a key man clause that allows the CEO to terminate your position during a restructuring. Your severance package is being drafted. Security is waiting at your desk to help you clear out your personal items." He fired me, in front of the board, in front of the woman who had spent more time picking out silk curtains than learning our profit margins. "You're firing your own daughter?" I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor. "For her? She doesn't know the difference between a hedge fund and a hedge maze, Dad." "You're making a scene, Maya,"
Celeste said softly, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. It's exactly this kind of emotional instability that proves Julian made the right choice. You should go. Take a spa day. You look tired. I looked at my father, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to say it was a test, but he just turned his back on me to whisper something in Celeste's ear. She giggled. I didn't cry. I felt something much hotter and more dangerous than tears. I felt the foundations of my world shatter, and in the wreckage, a cold, hard resolve began to form. I walked out of that boardroom, down the long hallway lined with portraits of my ancestors, men who built empires from nothing. I realized then that my father hadn't just fired me, he had declared war. The security guard, a man named Joe, who I'd brought coffee to every Monday for 5 years, looked at the floor as I packed my life into 2 cardboard boxes. I'm sorry, Miss Sterling, he whispered. It isn't right. It's okay, Joe, I said, taping the box shut. Just remember one thing. Foundations built on sand never hold when the tide comes in. As I walked out of the Sterling Cross building, I stopped at the revolving doors. I looked up at the golden letters etched into the stone. Sterling. My name, my legacy. I took a deep breath of the humid city air. My bank account was full, but my heart was empty. My father thought he had stripped me of my power, but he had actually done the one thing you should never do to an enemy. He had given me nothing left to lose. I spent the first 48 hours in a dark apartment, staring at the ceiling. My phone was blowing up with calls from friends who were really just vultures looking for gossip. I ignored them all. On the 3rd day, I got a text from my father's assistant. Mr. Sterling would like to remind you of your non-compete agreement. Any attempt to contact Sterling Cross clients will result in immediate legal action. I laughed. It was a hollow, jagged sound. He was scared. He knew that the clients didn't stay with Sterling Cross because of the name on the door. They stayed because of me. I stood up, walked to my windows overlooking the city, and pulled the curtains wide. I looked at the skyscrapers, the veins of the city where money flowed like blood. My father had the name, the building, and the young wife. But I had the secrets. I knew which clients were unhappy. I knew which vendors were being squeezed. I knew where the bodies were buried, because I was the one who had cleared the graveyard. I picked up my phone and made one call. Elias, I said when the voice answered. Elias Thorne was the former CFO of Sterling Cross, a man my father had forced into early retirement because he was too traditional, which was code for he caught Alistair's accounting errors. Maya, Elias sounded surprised. I heard what happened. It's the talk of the town. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, Elias. Be hungry. I'm starting something. No board, no ego, no glamour. Just pure, cutthroat results. Are you in? There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear the gears turning. Elias hated my father more than I did. What are we calling it? Elias asked. Vanguard Dynamics, I said, looking at my reflection in the glass. Because we're going to be the ones standing at the front when the Sterling Empire collapses. For the next 3 months, I was a ghost. I sold my apartment, moved into a small loft, and poured every cent of my savings and my severance into Vanguard. I didn't hire a flashy office. I hired a team of discards, the people my father had fired or overlooked because they weren't aesthetic enough for his new corporate vision. We worked 18-hour days in a room that smelled like stale coffee and ambition. But building the firm was only half the battle. To kill a king, you have to starve him. And the biggest source of food for Sterling Cross was the Morrison account. Arthur Morrison was an old-school titan. He ran the largest manufacturing conglomerate in the Midwest. He was loyal, he was traditional, and he was 60% of Sterling Cross's annual revenue. He also happened to be my godfather. I knew my father and Celeste would be wining and dining him, trying to keep him in the fold. I had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The moment Celeste inevitably tripped over her own ego. That moment came during the annual Founders Gala. I knew I wasn't invited. I knew my name had been stricken from the guest list, but I also knew the caterer. I arrived in a dress that was the color of midnight, sleek, understated, and lethal. I didn't go in through the front. I slipped in through the kitchen, heart racing. As I emerged into the ballroom, the music was playing, the champagne was flowing, and there, at the center of the room, was my father. He looked like he was on top of the world. Celeste was draped over his arm, wearing a dress that was practically neon, loudly explaining her new social media strategy for the logistics firm to a group of bored-looking executives. And there sat Arthur Morrison, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. I waited until my father and Celeste were pulled away for a photo op. I moved through the crowd like a shadow. When I reached Arthur's table, he looked up, his eyes widening behind his spectacles. "Maya," he whispered, "I was told you were in Europe, on a sabbatical." "Is that what they told you, Arthur?" I sat down in the empty chair next to him. "I haven't been in Europe. I've been in a basement in Queens, building a way to save your company." "Save it?" Arthur frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Have you looked at your shipping logs for the last month, Arthur, since the restructuring?" He hesitated. "There have been some delays. Celeste assured me it was just a transition phase." "It's not a transition," I said, leaning in, my voice dropping to a sharp whisper. "It's incompetence. They've rerouted your southern circuit through a third-party vendor to save costs for their year-end bonuses. Your cargo is sitting in a humid warehouse in Georgia right now. If it stays there another 48 hours, your electronics contract is voided." Arthur's face went pale. "They told me everything was on schedule." "They lied," I said, handing him a plain manila envelope. Inside is the tracking data, and inside is also a contract for Vanguard Dynamics. We can have your cargo on a plane by midnight, but you have to sign now, before my father sees me. Just as Arthur reached for the envelope, a shadow fell over the table. "Maya, what on earth are you doing here?" I looked up. My father was standing there, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and embarrassment. Behind him, Celeste looked like she was about to explode. "The help let us stray in," Celeste sneered, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "Security, why is this woman talking to our clients?" My father stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "I warned you about the non-compete, Maya. I will ruin you. I will take every cent you have left." I stood up slowly, smoothing out my dress. I didn't look at my father. I looked at Arthur Morrison. "Arthur," I said, "you can stay with the glamour and watch your electronics rot in Georgia. Or you can come with the person who actually knows how to move the world." The entire ballroom had gone silent. The tension was so thick you could taste the ozone in the air.
My father reached for the envelope on the table, but Arthur's hand got there first. Arthur looked at my father, then at Celeste, then back at me. The silence stretched for an eternity.
Arthur Morrison didn't look at the envelope. He looked at my father, Alistair, and then he looked at the young woman standing beside him. Celeste was fanning herself with a cocktail napkin, her eyes darting around the room to see who was watching. She was more concerned with the optics of the scene than the fact that she was about to lose a 9-figure account. "Alistair," Arthur said, his voice heavy like a rolling fog. "Is it true? Is my cargo sitting in Georgia?" Alistair let out a forced, rattling laugh. "Arthur, don't listen to her. She's going through a difficult, emotional transition. She's trying to disrupt our partnership out of spite." "It's a simple question, Alistair," Arthur snapped. The politeness was gone. This was the man who had built a steel empire from a single furnace. "Is my freight in Georgia?" Celeste chimed in, her voice an octave too high. "Mr. Morrison, we've optimized the route. It's part of our new green initiative. By using regional hubs, we're reducing the carbon footprint of your—" "You're reducing my profits," Arthur interrupted. He turned to me. "Maya, if I sign this, how fast can you move?" "The planes are fueled. My team is on standby at the hangars. If you sign in the next 5 minutes, your electronics hit the assembly line in Seoul by Monday morning. If you stay with Sterling Cross, you'll be filing an insurance claim by Wednesday." Arthur reached into his tuxedo pocket, pulled out a gold fountain pen, and signed the contract, right there on the linen tablecloth. He handed the manila envelope back to me. "Alistair," Arthur said, standing up, "consider this my formal notice. My legal team will follow up in the morning. Good night." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a legacy cracking in half. My father looked like he had been struck. His face turned a deep, bruised purple. Celeste, realizing the gravity of what had just happened, turned her fury on me. "You bitch!" she hissed, stepping forward. "You think you can just walk in here and steal what's ours? That's corporate espionage. We'll have you in handcuffs." I looked her up and down. The expensive dress, the borrowed jewelry, the desperation. "You can't steal what's already been abandoned, Celeste. You didn't want the work. You just wanted the title. Well, now you have it. Enjoy being the vice president of an empty building." I walked away. As I reached the exit, I heard my father's voice roar across the ballroom. "Maya, you're dead to me!" I didn't stop. I felt lighter than I had in a decade. The victory at the gala was short-lived. By Monday morning, Vanguard Dynamics was served with a lawsuit the size of a phone book. My father wasn't just suing for breach of non-compete, he was alleging theft of trade secrets, tortious interference, and a dozen other kitchen sink charges designed to freeze my bank accounts and bleed me dry in legal fees. "He's going for the jugular, Maya," Elias Thorne said, tossing the papers onto our scarred conference table. "He's hired the most expensive firm in the city. They're moving for an immediate injunction to shut us down." "Let them move," I said, leaning back in my chair. "How's the recruitment going?" Elias smiled, a slow, predatory grin. "Better than expected. When news broke that Arthur Morrison jumped ship, the exodus began. We've had 40 applications this morning, all from Sterling Cross. Logistics managers, analysts, even the IT department. They hate Celeste. She fired the cleaning staff to hire a personal wellness coordinator for her office." "Good. Hire the best of them. We need boots on the ground." But the tension was mounting. Every day, my lawyers called with more bad news. My father was using his influence to pressure banks to pull my lines of credit. He was calling every vendor in the city, telling them that if they did business with Vanguard, they'd never work with Sterling Cross again. He was trying to starve me out. 2 weeks into the legal battle, I received a private invite to a neutral location. It was a dark booth in a steakhouse downtown. I arrived to find Celeste sitting there alone, sipping a martini. She looked different. The glamour was fading. Her eyes were sunken, and she was gripping her glass so hard her knuckles were white. "I'm here to offer you a deal," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't do deals with shadows, Celeste. Where's Alistair?" "He's at home. He's not doing well, Maya. His blood pressure is through the roof. The board is turning on him. They're demanding he fix the Morrison situation or resign." She leaned in, her perfume cloying and heavy. "Give us back the Morrison account. Tell Arthur you made a mistake. If you do, I'll convince Julian to drop the lawsuit. You can go off and start a little boutique firm, something small, something that doesn't threaten him." I laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was a laugh of genuine pity. "You're scared. You realized that Alistair's temper is a liability, didn't you? You thought you were marrying a king, but you married a man who burns his own kingdom down to prove he's in charge." "I'm trying to save your family," she yelled, drawing looks from the other tables. "My family died the night you sat in my chair," I said, standing up. "Go back to Alistair. Tell him I'm not just taking Morrison, I'm taking the rest of them too." The war turned dirty on a Tuesday. One of our main warehouses in the docks was raided by the authorities. Someone had placed an anonymous tip that Vanguard was moving illicit goods. It was a blatant plant. A crate of unmarked electronics that didn't belong to any of our clients was found near the loading bay. I stood in the rain watching the police tape go up, while my father's lawyers stood on the sidewalk filming the whole thing on their phones. "They're going to frame us, Maya," Elias said, his voice grim. "If we lose our license, we're done." "Who was on the floor last night?" "A new hire, a transfer from Sterling Cross." I closed my eyes, letting the rain hit my face. He had sent a mole. My own father had planted evidence to put me in prison. The betrayal stung more than the firing. This wasn't business anymore. This was an attempt to erase my life. I spent the next 48 hours in a room with a private investigator. We went through every second of the security footage. We found it, a grainy image of the new hire, a man named Miller, moving a crate at 3 a.m. But we found something else, too. Miller had made a phone call right after moving the crate. We traced the number. It wasn't my father's. It was Celeste's personal burner phone. I didn't go to the police, not yet. I waited for the board of directors meeting at Sterling Cross.